Hello, and welcome back to Bedtime Stories with Vice Baby, where we will continue Betrothed. Chapter 6. Autumn has passed, and winter too had gone. Nadia had begun to be very homesick, and thought every day of her mother and their grandmother. She thought of Sasha too. The letters that came from home were kind and gentle, and it seemed as though everything by now were forgiven and forgotten. In May, after the examinations, she set off for home in good health and high spirits, and stopped on the way in Moscow to see Sasha. He was just the same as the year before, with the same beard and unkempt hair, with the same large beautiful eyes, and he still wore the same coat and canvas trousers. But he looked unwell and worried. He seemed both older and thinner, and kept coughing, and for some reason, he struck Nadia as gray and provincial. "My God, Nadia has come!" he said and laughed gaily. "My darling girl." They sat in the printing room, which was full of tobacco smoke and smelled strongly, staffingly of Indian ink and paint. Then they went to his room, which also smelt of tobacco and was full of the traces of spitting. Near a cold samovar stood a broken plate with dark paper on it, and there were masses of dead flies on the table and on the floor. And everything showed that Sasha ordered his personal life in a slovenly way and lived anyhow, with utter contempt for comfort, and if anyone began talking to him of his personal happiness, of his personal life, of affection for him, he would not have understood and would have only laughed. "It is all right. Everything has gone well," said Nadia hurriedly. "Mother came to see me in Petersburg in the autumn. She said that Granny is not angry, and only keeps going into my room and making the sign of the cross over the walls." Sasha looked cheerful, but he kept coughing, and talked in a cracked voice, and Nadia kept looking at him, unable to decide whether he really were seriously ill, or whether it was only her fancy. "Dear Sasha," she said, "you are ill." "No, it's nothing. I am ill, but not very." "Oh dear," cried Nadia, in agitation. "Why don't you go see a doctor? Why don't you take care of your health? My dear darling Sasha," she said, and tears gushed from her eyes, and for some reason there rose before her imagination Andrei Andreitch and the naked lady with the vase, and all her past which seemed now as far away as her childhood, and she began crying because Sasha no longer seemed to her so novel, so cultured, and so interesting as the year before. "Dear Sasha, you are very, very ill. I would do anything to make you not so pale and thin. I am so indebted to you. You can't imagine how much you had done for me, my good Sasha. In reality, you are now the person nearest and dearest to me." They sat on and talked, and now, after Nadia had spent a winter in Petersburg, Sasha, his works, his smile, his whole figure had for her a suggestion of something out of date, old-fashioned, done with long ago and perhaps already dead and buried. "I'm going down to the Volga the day after tomorrow," said Sasha, "and then to drink komis. I mean to drink komis. A friend and his wife are going with me. His wife is a beautiful woman. I am always at her, trying to persuade her to go to the university. I want her to turn her life upside down." After having talked, they drove to the station. Sasha got her tea and apples, and when the train began moving, and he waved his handkerchief at her, smiling, it could be seen, even from his legs, that he was very ill and would not live long. Nadia reached her native town at midday. As she drove home from the station, the streets struck her as very wide, and the houses very small and squat. There were no people about. She met no one but the German piano tuner in a rusty gray coat. And all the houses looked as though they were covered with dust. Granny seemed to have grown quite old, but, as fat and plain as ever, flung her arms around Nadia and cried for a long time with her face on Nadia's shoulder, unable to tear herself away. Nina Ivanovna looked much older and plainer and seemed shriveled up, but was still tightly laced, and still had diamonds flashing on her fingers. "My darling," she said, trembling all over. "My darling." Then they sat down and cried without speaking. It was evident that both mother and grandmother realized that the past was lost and gone, never to return. They had now no position in society, no prestige as before, no right to invite visitors. So, it is when in the midst of an easy, careless life, the police suddenly burst in at night and made a search. And it turns out that the head of the family was embezzled money or committed forgery, and goodbye then to the easy, careless life forever. Nadia went upstairs and saw the same bed, the same windows with naive white curtains, and outside the window the same garden, gay and noisy, bathed in sunshine. She touched the table, sat down, and sank into thought. And she had a good dinner and drank tea with delicious rich cream. But something was missing. There was a sense of emptiness in the rooms, and the ceilings were so low. In the evening she went to bed, covered herself up, and for some reason it seemed to her to be funny, lying in this snug, very soft bed. Nina Ivanovna came in for a minute. She sat down as people who feel guilty sit down, timidly, and looking about her. "Well, tell me, Nadia," she inquired after a brief pause. "Are you contented? Quite contented?" "Yes, mother." Nina Ivanovna got up, made the sign of the cross over Nadia and the windows. "I've become religious, as you see," she said. "You know, I'm studying philosophy now, and I'm always thinking and thinking. And many things have become as clear as daylight to me. It seemed to me that what is above all necessary is that life should pass as it were through a prism. Tell me, mother, how is Granny in health?" "She seems all right. When you went away that time with Sasha and the telegram came from you, Granny fell on the floor as she read it. For 3 days she lay without moving. After that, she was always praying and crying. But now she is all right again." She got up and walked about the room. Tick-tock, tapped the watchman. Tick-tock, tick-tock. "What is above all necessary is that life should pass as it were through a prism," she said. "In other words, that life in consciousness should be analyzed into its simplest elements as into the 7 primary colors, and each element must be studied separately." What Nina Ivanovna said further, and when she went away, Nadia did not hear, as she quickly fell asleep. May passed, June came. Nadia had grown used to being at home. Granny busied herself about the samovar, heaving deep sighs. Nina Ivanovna talked in the evening about her philosophy. She still lived in the house like a poor relation, and had to go to Granny for every farthing. There were lots of flies in the house, and the ceiling seemed to become lower and lower. Granny and Nina Ivanovna did not go out in the streets for fear of meeting Father Andrei and Andrei Andreevich. Nadia walked about the garden and the streets, looked at the gray fences, and it seemed to her that everything in the town had grown old, was out of date, and was only waiting either for the end or for the beginning of something young and fresh. Oh, If only that new bright life would come more quickly. That life in which one will be able to face one's face boldly and directly, to know that one is right, to be lighthearted and free. And sooner or later, such a life will come. The time will come when, of Granny's house, where things are so arranged that the 4 servants can only live in one room in filth in the basement, the time will come when of that house not a trace will remain, and it will be forgotten. No one will remember it, and Nadia's only entertainment was from the boys next door. When she walked about the garden, they knocked on the fence and shouted in mockery, "Betrothed! Betrothed!" A letter from Sasha arrived from Saratov. In his gay dancing handwriting, he told them that his journey to the Volga had been a complete success, but that he had been taken rather ill in Saratov, had lost his voice, and had been for the last fortnight in the hospital. She knew what that meant, and she was overwhelmed with a foreboding that was like a conviction. And it vexed her that this foreboding and the thought of Sasha did not distress her so much as before. She had a passionate desire for life, longed to be in Petersburg, and her friendship with Sasha seemed now sweet but somehow far, far away. She did not sleep all night, and in the morning sat at the window listening, and she did, in fact, hear voices below. Granny, agitated, was asking questions rapidly. Then someone began crying. When Nadia went downstairs, Granny was standing in the corner, praying before the icon, and her face was tearful. A telegram lay on the table. For some time, Nadia walked up and down the room, listening to Granny's weeping. Then she picked up the telegram and read it. It announced that the previous morning, Alexander Timofeyich, or more simply Sasha, had died at Saratov of consumption. Granny and Nina Ivanovna went to the church to order a memorial service, while Nadia went on walking about the rooms and thinking. She recognized clearly that her life had been turned upside down as Sasha wished. That here she was, alien, isolated, useless, and that everything here was useless to her. That all the past had been torn away from her and vanished as though it had been burnt up and the ashes scattered to the winds. She went into Sasha's room and stood there for a while. "Goodbye, dear Sasha," she thought, and before her mind rose the vista of a new, wide, spacious life, and that life, still obscure and full of mysteries, beckoned her and attracted her. She went upstairs to her own room to pack, and next morning said goodbye to her family, and full of life and high spirits left the town, as she supposed, forever. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Bedtime Stories with Vice Baby. I hope you all have a good night and sweet dreams.